Okay, hello everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us today. My name is Ayman Qadr. I am the Arabic Language Community Facilitator for the Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies, also known as INEE. The INEE and the Global Campaign for Education are excited to have you in today's webinar, special webinar commemorating the World Refugee Day. Um, I would like to start by a few housekeeping items. Due to the high numbers of participants in this webinar, all microphones and cameras are muted. Only presenters can speak and show their videos. All speakers can write their questions in the Q&A chat box or contact the organizers via the chat box. Make sure that you write your questions in the Q&A chat box, not the chat box. You can post your questions in the Q&A anytime. If you have any questions for a specific presenter, please note their names in your question. This webinar is 75 minutes long. It will be recorded. Recording and all related presentations, resources, and all links will be posted at INEE website and shared on social media. The presentations and the discussion will be in English. And there are a live interpretation into Arabic, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. So please click on the globe items at the bottom of your screen to choose your preferred language. Also, closed captioning is available. If you don't automatically see the English caption at the bottom of your Zoom window, click the caption button to turn on and off the captioning. So we have over 600 registrants for this webinar today. So please feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourself, where are you joining us from. So at the time when the education is under attack, violated, and abused, teachers and education personnel are deliberately targeted. We do have a moral and ethical and legal obligations to stand up for learners, teachers, and all education staff. We must advocate for the protection of the right to education from Sudan to Palestine, from Yemen to Syria, from Ukraine to Afghanistan to Haiti to DRC. Today's webinar will focus on Gaza. For almost 2 years, over 658,000 Palestinian children in Gaza have had no schooling. More than 90% of education infrastructures has been intentionally damaged or destroyed by the Israeli forces through airstrikes, burning, and controlled demolitions. Many teachers were among the people who were killed in the last 20 months of this war. Recent figures indicate 917 teachers and administrators were killed in Gaza. Many displaced children are learning in makeshift tents or have no access to education at all. Even if education does resume, children and youth in Gaza will experience cumulative learning losses up to 6 years. This question and this situation poses a significant risk of leaving an entire generation of children behind. When schools are destroyed, so too are hopes and dreams. Attacks on education cannot be tolerated. The international community must send a clear message that those who target schools and universities will be held responsible. This webinar today will explore the challenging realities faced by learners and educators in Gaza, highlighting the severe disruption of education caused by the ongoing bombardment and the forced displacement. Panelists will discuss the role of the international community in upholding the right to education in conflict-affected settings, and will propose actions needed to protect and restore education for children in Gaza. Today, we are really pleased and honored to have diverse voices in this webinar. The first, hopefully she was able to join us, Julia Duckham, the Honorable Director for Education, who is going to give us some opening remark for this webinar.
So I want to thank you all for and the INEE for this invitation. I won't be with you to Amman today, but I wanted to make sure that I came for this important World Refugee Day event and speak particularly on the right to education in Gaza. I can't imagine a more relevant theme for World Refugee Day this year than to speak about the children in Gaza who now have moved from displaced to 100% displaced. So between the refugees and the internally displaced children in Gaza. So we know that, of course, their education is under grave threat. And I want to be clear here. In Gaza, it's not really just the right to education that is at risk, but the entire humanitarian structure and global structures writ large are at the verge of collapse in Gaza. As we are all proud INEE members, it is a privilege for me to be here today, but also to build an enduring partnership with you and to help advance the education and the right to education of the children of Gaza. In 2011, UNRWA adopted the INEE minimum standards as the guiding instrument of our education programs in the region. And as you can imagine, we have been running education on emergencies for many years. Together, we have worked to uphold the right to education of all children and youth, regardless of crisis, conflict, or displacement. As members of the INEE network, we all agree that that education is a basic human right. Even in times of crises, it is not a luxury or an afterthought. It is a frontline necessity. Education provides children with a sense of safety, normalcy, and hope amid the chaos. It is a protective force buffering against trauma, nurturing resilience, and sowing the seeds for peace and recovery. For over 75 years, the UNRWA mission has remained clear: to support Palestine refugees in realizing their full human potential, even in the most challenging circumstances. And despite all the problems, we remain providing the basic services as we were mandated to do. UNRWA operates one of the largest refugee education systems in the world across our 5 fields of operation: Gaza, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. We have 711 schools and employ over 22,000 education staff. Our commitment is to ensure continuity of learning, even amid emergencies and protracted crises. But today, the right of education of Palestine refugees is under threat, jeopardizing the development of the entire region as we face an unprecedented crisis. For more than 18 months, the education system in Gaza has been entirely or nearly entirely shut down. This means 300,000 children enrolled in UNRWA schools and over 1,800 youth enrolled in our vocational training centers have been out of school for a second consecutive year. The scale of learning loss is staggering, and the consequences are profound. We also recognize and are worried about the non-UNRWA students, and we are very concerned for the other 300,000 students who are outside of UNRWA schools. As quantified by Cambridge University study in partnership with UNRWA, Gaza's children had already lost 14 months of education since 2019 due to COVID-19, earlier Israeli military operations, and this current war as of August 2024. If the fighting continues until 2026, the losses will stretch to 5 years. Imagine these are the children who will be at the end of their primary school cycle, ready to go to secondary school, and yet they unfortunately will have learned next to nothing. These children are not only missing out on education, they are enduring famine, trauma, displacement, bombardment, homelessness, and the loss of their family members. Many are now living with new disabilities. Others face child marriage or child labor, and many have lost every single member of their family. Their world has collapsed, and rebuilding it will require urgent, sustained, and collective action. Despite these immense challenges, UNRWA has not stood still. As the largest provider of both education and mental health and psychosocial support in Gaza, we continue to innovate in the face of adversity, developing practical and scalable solutions to ensure learning never stops for Palestine refugee children. We're delivering learning using both digital and face-to-face methods where possible. We're reaching children with psychosocial support, even in the absence of a ceasefire. Our education and emergencies response has reached hundreds of thousands of children since the onset of the conflict. Together with our partners, we've managed to, and during those few weeks of hope, we probed that we were allowed to, whatever we were allowed to deliver, and we can quickly resume our many services to support the most vulnerable. In this event, my colleague Frost Devitt will share with you in some detail our education and emergencies response in Gaza. I want to close by calling all of you to action, to come together as partners in the education in emergencies, to safeguard the right of education for every child in Gaza. Without a ceasefire, without humanitarian access, and without a full restoration of education, we risk losing an entire generation to violence, poverty, and exclusion. A just and durable solution for Palestine refugees remains the most sustainable path to rebuilding the education system and securing long-term stability in the region. While UNRWA continues to deliver education under extraordinary circumstances, no emergency response can substitute for the stability and opportunity that a political resolution will bring. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope I can hear the rest of the presentations, but if I fall off, I wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia. I really appreciate your remarks. And I'm now would like to invite Faiza Hassan, the INI director, to give us also additional remarks. Please, over to you, Faiza.
Thank you, Ayman. I hope you and the colleagues can hear me clearly. Thank you very much to everyone who's joined us for this important conversation today. This conversation takes place ahead of World Refugee Day, which, as we know, is a day that aims to raise awareness of the struggles and the resilience of those that are forced to leave their homes. Refugees are not numbers. They are people with faces, with names, and with stories. And nowhere is that more visible and more urgent than it is in Gaza. Today, we will hear from many colleagues throughout this webinar, some of them based out of Palestine. And as my colleague Ayman has mentioned, more than 65,000 children, 650,000 children and youth are out of school. More than 90% of education infrastructure has been damaged or destroyed in Gaza. And this is not the result of a natural disaster. This is a direct result of our collective failure to protect. We often speak about commitments to international law, to the rights of children, to education in emergencies, but the reality in Gaza really just shows how fragile some of those commitments are, and really our systems have failed. At the same time, as we hear from colleagues in Gaza and in Palestine, we will see really powerful examples of persistence, of teachers continuing to teach intense, of children trying to learn throughout the trauma, of communities holding on to education as a form of survival. That resilience is extraordinary, but it should not be necessary. I'll end by saying that we need to do more. We need to do it now. And this responsibility doesn't sit with any one actor alone. It sits with all of us. Sustained, people-powered social movements can make a difference. We've seen it throughout history and we continue to see it. I believe that collectively we can come together and we can make a difference to see an end to this. I'll stop there. Back to you, Ayman.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Faiza, for these powerful words and call for action as we are starting the webinar. Now, I would like to introduce our next speaker, my colleague Baha Shatali, who is the sub-education cluster coordinator, addressing us from Gaza. Over to you, Baha, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ayman, and thank you, Julia and Faiza, for the powerful words, and thank you for the INE for hosting this webinar. Next, please. Just to give you an overview, that's in Gaza, we have 658,000 children, those who affected by this war. 49.8% of them are female girls. Those children supported by 2022, more than 22,000 of teachers, all of them impacted negatively and affected by this war. Those children lost at least 2 school years. And more than 15,000 students killed and 681 teachers were killed, more than 22,000 students injured, and more than 2,000 teachers injured. Those are the human losses. They are not numbers, but they have their lives, their future, their dreams, and all of these a future that they thought. Despite the casualties, the human losses, we have losses in the infrastructure. About 1/3 of the schools classifies as directly hit or damaged by the Israelis, and those were operated by UNRWA. And these figures is presenting the numbers of the schools that had classified by governmental, UNRWA, or private. Next, please. In the total of the impacts that the children first, that they have impact on their mental health and well-being. Before the 7th of October, there was the children's living in a depression and a grief and fear, and this is according to the Save the Children study. The children's still facing traumatic events affecting their mental health and well-being, and this is will last for long on their learning achievements. And they have, all the children have no safe place to play or learn. And you can imagine of this. Before the ceasefire, there is some areas which called so-called humanitarian areas where theoretically the children can be with their families, but now there is no safe place. There is no humanitarian, even the so-called humanitarian areas. Schools are either destroyed or used as IDPs shelters, and using by the schools, by the IDPs, this is need and strategy, exit strategy to evacuate them once the ceasefire, inshallah, soon will be to be used and back to be hand over back to the children. And this is one of the challenge. Next, please. For the full pictures, the Israeli Authority imposed a full blockade since the 2nd of March after the ceasefire. And this restricted and all the entry of supplies, including food, medicine, and fuel, and learning. On the 18th of May, they allowed the entry temporarily to resume some limited aid. Education was not part of it, so still we are facing. The humanitarian organizations warn of acute level of hunger and higher proportion of children diagnosed with acute malnutrition. In the temporary learning spaces, we were provided with the support from the WFP, some snacks and some. With this new situation, we stopped to provide this. Attendance has declined to the half since the suspensions. Ongoing, the attacks on the schools continue to instill fear among the parents and the children, and this has significantly impacted the children's and restrict our scale up the education in emergency. Next, please. Sorry. Based on the satellite damage assessment that the education cluster conducted, dated on 4th of April, 95.4% of the schools sustained some level of damages in their buildings, either direct head damage or likely. 88.8% of the schools will either need full reconstruction or major rehabilitation to be again functionals. 1/3 of direct hit and damaged schools are run by UN schools through UNRWA. 62% of the school buildings have been used by IDPs. Shelters are directly hit. So it's with the IDPs inside, it's also targeted. So many of the satellite images shows an evidence used as a military by the Israeli security forces. Next, please. The assessment found that 406 school buildings have been hit directly since the 7th of October. The 7th of October. This represents 72% of the total school buildings. You can imagine the big number. At least 85 schools were totally destroyed. Another 73 schools lost at least half of its structure. And if you convert it to a number of learners, it's a huge of numbers that they are losing their schools. The North Gaza governorate is the most affected governorate with 100% of total schools buildings being directly hit or damaged, followed by Rafah governorate with 94%, and then while 92.8% of the Gaza governorate classified as directly hit. Next, please. This shows the trend, how it is increased since the 7th of October. Next, please. This is some of the pictures next that shows the destroyed, using it as a military. Next, please. If you can just go through quickly these pictures. This is after and before, and you can see the level of damage. This is some videos. I will leave it to you after the webinar. You can see it. Next, please. And here you can see this Israeli soldiers using it as a military. Next, please. Here the tanks inside the schools. Next, please. For the education response plan, we have a 3-phase response plan, and we have the flash appeal. It will target more than 0.6 million. It will require $230.3 million to restore and support the restoration of the education or implementing education and emergency activities. Next, please.
If we can wrap up, please. Thank you.
Yes, this is some of the activities, responsive priorities. That's if you go next, I will leave it for you. Next, please. And this is this is some of the pictures where we are using the temporary learning spaces. Next, please. Here we have like 51 partners who's operating in all the areas except Rafah, which is under full control of the Israelis. Next, please. Since during the 2025, we have the partners managed to establish 478 temporary learning spaces, serving more than 155 students. Next, please. But due to the evacuation orders and the displacement and the attacks, only 224 were still operational by end of May, serving 78,000 students. Next, please. These the numbers of the TLSs that affected by the displacement or the attacks or due to the fund cuts. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. The challenges. Fear of attacks, which is limiting the access to essential activities. The response severely disrupted by the ongoing challenges, access restricted, continuous evacuation orders, loss of equipment, restriction on the limited access to internet, which prevented and the children to link with the tawjihi, the grade 12, that they are supposed to be finished last year, and the new one, which is the next week on the 21st, will start the new tawjihi. We have more than 70,000 students that they are having no clarity on their future, continuous restrictions by the Israelis on the supplies, which is preventing the scale up, funding shortage, deprioritizing the education, school in use as shelters. So these challenges. Next, please. I will how to protect, prioritizing the education in a humanitarian response, recognizing the education as functional cluster, peace applies to be enters, protection of education from attacks. This is a call, should every want to call it funding for the education. All the donors should resume their support to the education, in kind of support, also access to learning. This is need to be ensured and protected by all means, a humanitarian access movement between all of the areas of Gaza. Next, please. The inaction, the cost of inaction for supporting children is significant and far-reaching. This is need to focus on and to support the education to restore it. Next, please. This is some of the voices from the affected people, and then we'll end up here with one of the mothers that's saying, even if I know that my child might be attacked or killed while he or she in the TLS, at least I know he was enjoying his learning and he have an access to the learning activities, and he died with smile and enjoyed sometimes. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Baha, for this really powerful quotes from parents in Gaza, and all support and solidarity with colleagues for colleagues and community education in Gaza. And now we'll move to Frost Dabit, the Senior Education Program Specialist at Marwa. to talk us about the UNRWA education, the emergencies response. And if I can ask you, please, for us to stick on 7 minutes, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Ayman, and thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Aini, for organizing this important webinar and for the kind invitation to participate. I feel deeply honored to be here today to speak to you on behalf of UNRWA, on behalf of my colleagues in Gaza, about all the work that they do despite the extremely adverse conditions they live in order to ensure mental health and psychosocial support, as well as some continuity of learning to the children in Gaza. If we can move to the slides, the UNRWA slides, because, yes, the next one, please. So as UNRWA in Gaza before October 2023, UNRWA was running an education system for close to over 7 decades. We had 288 schools running in 183 buildings. Many of them were doing double shift. We had 2 vocational training centers, and we had close to 300,000 students. We were the second largest education provider in Gaza after the Ministry of Education, offering accredited education to children up to grade 9. And we had close to 2,000 youth in our technical vocational training centers. We employed 10,000 education staff, along with 800 school counselors and assistant counselors. With the events now, today we have, as reported by the cluster in the last assessment in May, 95.4% of the schools sustained some level of damages to the buildings, and 1/3 of the directly hit or damaged schools are UNRWA schools. There was a question in the chat, if I managed to spot it correctly, about schools being protected under international law. Yes, and for UNRWA, they are also protected under privileges and immunities because these are UN premises. No student, including UNRWA students, as my colleague Baha also mentioned and Julia before, had attended formal education since October 2023. And according to UNICEF assessment of 2024, all students in Gaza are in need of mental health and psychosocial support. The next slide, please. So this was mentioned by Julia in the opening. We did a study together with Cambridge University in which the study quantified the loss of learning due to the events. And basically, according to the study, and as of August 2024, children in Gaza had lost 14 months of education since the 2019 due to COVID-19, the earlier Israeli military operations, and the current war. The study estimates that if the fighting continues until 2026, the losses could stretch up to 5 years. Of course, this is in addition to all the challenges that children are facing in Gaza, as mentioned earlier, famine, trauma, displacement, disabilities, bombardment, homelessness. So, like their right to education is not the only right that is being violated in this context. Up to the next slide, please. So in terms of the UNRWA response, and if I recall properly, like over a year ago, I sat in a similar webinar on Gaza, and we spoke about the UNRWA phased plan for education in emergencies in Gaza that was developed jointly with cluster and partners, where we start with non-formal, with MEMH PSS, transitioning into non-formal education, and then moving into formal education. Unfortunately, with the absence of a ceasefire, absence of humanitarian corridor, the continuation of hostilities, we transitioned into a scenario-based plan, meaning to do whatever that can be done under the circumstances. And we worked on 3 tracks. That is MHPSS, non-formal education in temporary learning spaces, and some sort of distance learning. The next slide, please. So in terms of mental health and psychosocial support, with the counselors and assistant counselors on the ground, we have managed to reach over 500,000 children with MHPSS sessions, recreational activities, psychosocial first aid, and other type of counseling. We do employ in Gaza more than 500 school counselors and assistant counselors that continue to work inside the UNRWA schools that are now turned into shelters. With regards to non-formal education in temporary learning spaces, we do have 450 spaces in 59 UNRWA schools that are turned into shelters. And this number keeps on fluctuating because of the volatile situation and evacuation orders. So sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But in total, we have reached over 56,000 children with non-formal education in these spaces, offering 7 hours a day, 6 days a week of learning and MHPSS activity, supported by 1,800 UNRWA teachers. We have also launched, and as of January this year, a distance learning program using the self-learning program that UNRWA had developed earlier and is uploaded on the UNRWA digital learning platform. And with this, we have managed to reach almost equal to the student population that we had prior to the events of 2023. So reaching close to 300,000 children that are enrolled in this program, with some children managing to progress from one grade level to the other. We are now running the second cycle of this program that started on the 22nd of April. And colleagues in Gaza are also planning a third cycle on the 15th of July for around 50,000 students that were enrolled in UNRWA schools before, but did not enroll yet in this distance education program. The program is supported by over 7,000 teachers in Gaza. Next slide, please. And I would like here to just wrap up by saying that these numbers, if any, they are but a true testimony for the importance of education in emergencies in such circumstances. The community, the parents, the children, the teachers, the counselors chose education, as education brings hope in these dark times. It's also a testimony of the over 7 decades of plus of UNRWA work in Gaza. UNRWA has the system, it has the infrastructure and the staff on the ground that allow us to mobilize quickly and start providing education in emergencies since day one. I wish to thank you, and I realized that with Ayman putting his camera that I'm already reaching my time. So thank you very much, and happy to answer questions later.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Frost, and feel free, please, to engage with the questions in the Q&A. Thank you for your presentation, and thanks, UNRWA, for the continuous support to Palestinian refugees despite all the challenges. And I would like also to take this opportunity to thank all the participants in the webinar for posting all these questions in the Q&A. Please keep them coming. Hopefully we'll have time to answer them at the end of the webinar. This webinar, again, is organized by INEE and the Global Campaign for Education, commemorating the World Refugee Day. Now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Saleh Al-Balawi. Saleh is a Palestinian researcher from Gaza, based in New Zealand. Saleh, I'll pass on the microphone to you, please, in 7 minutes. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Ayman, and thanks a lot for all INE colleagues for having this webinar at this critical time of the Palestinian life. So today I speak as a survivor from Gaza, as a person who received his primary education in one of UNRWA schools in Gaza. As a person who get his all vaccine at UNRWA clinic in Gaza, and as a person who went with his family to one of UNRWA shelters in Gaza, seeking the safety from bombing in the first months of the current genocide. Thank you, UNRWA, and all humanitarian actors in the field for their efforts to serving Gaza and Gazian people. Jumping to the topic of this webinar as it highlighting the importance of education for Palestinians. All children have the right to go to school, to learn, and to receive a good quality of education, regardless of who they are and where they are. Education and our education, Palestinian education, is a human right. Education is not a luxury for Palestinian. It is our right as a human being. It is not recreational. It is fundamental. It is how we grow and how we define who we are and how we protect our identity under occupation during the forced displacement and among the current genocide. In the face of a deeply unbalanced reality between an occupied Palestinian people and a powerful occupying Israeli forces, education for Palestinians is the only tool we have to restore the balance. It is how we fight back, not with not with weapons, but with knowledge, with a dignity, with the global voices that can speak our rights to life with a dignity, and to contribute to build our Palestinian state where our children have rights to grow and to show our contribution to our sustainable development goals. We believe that education in Gaza have been one of the most systematically destroyed sector in this ongoing genocide. As Mr. Baha reported, let me tell you why. Why? Because the Israeli regime understands of the power of educated Palestinian. What education produce? Engineers, doctors, lawyers, teachers, human rights defenders, people who can speak truth to power on the international stage. People like me and many others who raise our voices in English and Arabic and other language to say Palestinian children have the right to go to school, have the right to learn. Palestinian children have their dignity when they learn, and we will never give up. Education is not only about learning subjects, it's also one of our few remaining psychosocial lifelines in the middle of the war, in the rubble of our schools. Education are still showing up to learn. In Gaza, classrooms have become recovery spaces where we help Palestinian children to eat, to drink, and to cope with the trauma, to cope with losses, and to cope with fears. When we offer learning, we also offer hope for us. Let me share one story from Gaza, from a female teacher, 33 years old. She lost her house in north of Gaza, and she teach 28 students inside tents in Deir al-Balah. She says, the sound of drones interrupts me every few minutes while I teach. Children who came from different communities along the Gaza Strip and have lost their homes, assets, and school bags are hungry, yet they still want to learn. I know, and there's mother know, that a muscle may interrupt our way back or even the tent where we are and may kill them. But we all insist on returning to the tent to the next morning, despite the drones overheaded, despite the bombing, despite the fear and the rubble across the Gaza. We need to learn because education is the only hope for us as a Palestinian. This is what resilience, Sumud, looks like in Gaza and many Palestinian areas in West Bank and east of Jerusalem. Palestinian resilience is not just about surviving the bomb, but it is about standing in the rubble of destroyed schools and saying, we will rebuild. These classrooms will be full again. Even if the children are injured or orphaned or displaced or homeless, we will learn. Education is how we look forward the future. Through the broken windows of our classrooms, we imagine recovery, dignity, freedom. We do not just need schools rebuilt, but we need schools building back better, to be more inclusive, more supportive, more connected to our psychosocial needs, and more rooted in our in entity and history and hopes. Today, I say to all of you, we will not give up on education, but we cannot do it alone. We need your solidarity, not just in words, but in action. We need full funding for our education and emergency programs. We need support to rebuild Gaza schools, not walls, not roofs, but the spire of learning. We need protection of our students and teachers under international law. We need to empower our teachers and counselors. We need to global recognition that education is resistant and it is our human rights. We need to ensure that UNRWA and public and the private schools are funded and functioning well. In Gaza, we do not teaching children only to how to read and to write. We teach them how to live, how to hope, and how to stand tall. Education is how we stand live. Education is how we stay Palestinian. And I can share with you the messages of all Palestinians in Gaza in the tents and say you have the message to fight in our human rights through education. Thank you, Ayman, and thanks for all of this space for me to give these messages from Gaza.
Awesome. Thank you
So,
so much. Thank you so much, Salah, for this invaluable insight, this call for action, this solidarity, message of solidarity, leaving us with really these very powerful, remarkable messages. And I going through the chat books as you were speaking, and I can see more messages coming from webinar attendees. Thank you so much. Some of these messages is around, from Tharwat, education is not a military target. Let Gaza children learn in a safe and dignity. Stop targeting schools and mines. Another member saying children in Gaza have the right to protection and safe access to education. Stop the war. Stop the destruction of education. So thank you, Salah. And now I'm going to hand it over to Rifat Sabah, who is the president of the Global Campaign for Education. Over to you, Rifat. Pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Ayman. Is my voice here?
Yes, we hear you and see you clearly. Please go ahead.
Please, can you show the PowerPoint?
Sure.
Okay, thanks, Ayman, and thanks for all my colleagues who speak for me. After what I hear, it's really now it's needed action, because there's need action now. And can you move that, or I can move the slide? I can. Okay. First of all, really, we need to defending the right to education. We should act, and we are speaking about the international community, humanitarian donors, education actors. We need immediate fund to really rebuild the schools, provide emergency learning spaces, support teachers, offer psychosocial service. This is very urgent because the mass displacement, the school destruction, the psychological trauma, it's huge. Education must be recognized as a life-saving, not as suspended during crisis. Children in Gaza cannot wait. We say education cannot wait, but the life also cannot wait. Now, we should ensure that Gaza children are not denied their future. Next, please. Also, urgent appeal for the education crisis in light of the devastating humanitarian crisis in Gaza. We argue regional bodies such as the Arab League, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and the African Union, and the global actors, including UN agencies, donors, international NGOs, the education coalition in all over the world, to take immediate and coordinated action to safeguard the right to education for the Palestinian children, especially in Gaza. Next, please. Declare education as a protected right and a humanitarian priority. Publicity recognize education as a non-negotiable human rights, even during the emergencies. We should advocate for the inclusion for education in all humanitarian response frameworks. Next, please. Mobilize immediate and flexible funding for emergency transitional education. We should prioritize support for temporary learning spaces, school rehabilitation, digital learning alternatives, psychological support to ensure funding mechanisms such as Education Cannot Wait are activated strongly for Gaza. Next, please. Protect education infrastructure and personnel. We call for accountability for attack on school, teacher, student, in line with the international humanitarian law. Next, please. Appeal to the UN Secretary General. We call upon the Secretary General of the United Nations to uphold their legal and moral responsibilities to ensure the continuity of UNRWA mandate and its vital role in education, to take all necessary measures to counter any political, financial, or legislative attempt aimed at undermining the agency, as such action was a serious threat to international legitimacy. Second, appeal to donors' country. We argue the countries that have suspended or halted their funding to immediately resume financial support to UNRWA, separate the humanitarian issue from political considerations, act in accordance with their obligation under international human rights law. Next, please. We also call on the Arab and Islamic State to establish permanent fund dedicated to supporting the education of Palestinian refugees under the framework of UNRWA in order to strengthen financial independence and reduce political blackmail. We demand that government of the Arab and Islamic countries employ their diplomatic tools to exert pressure in international forums, including the Human Rights Council, and to ensure that protection of UNRWA is prioritized within their political and diplomatic agenda. Next, please. We appeal to relevant United Nations agencies, including UNESCO, UNICEF, the Office of the High Commission for Human Rights, urgently intervene to guarantee the continuity of education under UNRWA in all areas of operation, expand their support for UNRWA's educational program, particularly in Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. Next, please. We call also for an impartial and transparent international assessment of the violation targeting UNRWA educational institution in occupied territories. The submission of the details report on the Human Rights Council, including concrete recommendation, effective follow-up mechanism. This is a crucial step toward the adoption of international measures to protect these institutions, ensure their continued operation in occupied according to the international law. Next, please. We argue the international civil society and the global education network to adopt a strong solidarity position in support of UNRWA continuity, to condemn policies that threaten UNRWA role of existence, to mobilize global education and public opinion in favor of the right of the Palestinian refugee to be safe, equitable, and sustainable education. Next, please. finally, I would like to say finally that I am calling to have global day focusing on Gaza. And now I am calling INI and the Global Campaign for Education, the Education International, all the civil society to have a global day to protect the humanity and focusing in Gaza. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rifat, for this powerful end of your presentation and for call for action. And definitely will be happy to further coordinate and organize more advocacy-related forums on the education in Gaza and the other crisis conflict-affected context. Now I'm going to hand over to Ingrid Lewis, who is the Managing Director for the Enabling Education Network. Over to you, Ingrid. Thank you.
Thanks, Ayman. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this event today alongside such a great panel of speakers. Writing rather than speaking is my passion, particularly writing about education and learning. I love using writing to stimulate conversations, debates, arguments. But when it comes to Palestine, and especially the last 20 months in Gaza, writing is a responsibility, and it's one that we all carry. Writing about Gaza isn't just a process of reporting the facts, it's a process of conviction, endurance, and actually some bravery. And I'm going to unpack this a bit in my presentation. So briefly, for those who don't know ENET, the Enabling Education Network was started 28 years ago to support global dialogue on inclusive education. In our founding principles, we promise to create conversations. We promise to swim upstream, challenge the status quo, help people to leave their comfort zones, and if necessary, to make people feel uncomfortable, because that's how change happens. ENET's been writing its own content and publishing other people's articles about the educational impact of Israel's occupation in Palestine for many years. And in October 2023, we automatically increased our written and verbal advocacy because it quickly became clear that education in Gaza was being attacked by Israel on an unprecedented scale. And at the same time, we saw weak statements coming from lots of well-known organizations. NGOs are often among the first to highlight when governments and the media are not being transparent. They're the first on the scene in a crisis and a conflict. They fight for education to be given attention in emergencies when other people ignore it. NGOs' insights and analyses carry weight with authorities and with the public, so they shoulder a huge communication responsibility. So it was somewhat shocking and disappointing that for many months after October 2023, numerous NGOs tiptoed around the topic of what Israel was doing to the people and education system in Gaza. Many NGOs mirrored the mainstream media's rather opaque narrative style. So school children were dying rather than being killed by Israeli forces. Schools were being bombed, but the name of the bomber wasn't mentioned. Many seem to simply forget to inform their supporters about the context of decades of Israel's illegal occupation, apartheid policies, and denial of Palestinian human rights. Now, ENET's mission is to rock the boat in order to stimulate debate and change. So I found it hard to understand NGO reluctance to speak out on Gaza, especially once the genocide became so obvious. We're all supposed to be champions of the most marginalized, aren't we? So why was there so much fear around championing this group of oppressed people? Now, I get that talking about Palestine feels tricky, right? There's the constant threat that you will be called anti-Semitic or a Hamas supporter if you criticize Israel. Many of us have been raised in a media culture that has dehumanized Palestinian suffering for decades, and that now consistently perpetuates Israel's narrative that it's just defending itself, that the deaths of school children are terrible accidents, and that mass starvation is not the intended outcome of blocking all access to food. But NGOs should know better than to believe just what they see in the media. So what has caused many NGOs to gag themselves and abandon their trademark bravery? I've heard the excuse that funding or permission for their global programs will be put at risk if NGOs upset their key donor or government over just this one issue. Some have said that they fear their organization's reputation will be damaged if the media twists their messages about Gaza into somehow being anti-Semitic or pro-terror. And then others have said they don't feel well enough informed, so they'll stick to the basics rather than mentioning any of the context of apartheid, colonialism, or genocide. By contrast, people have told me that it's easy for ENET to be vocal because we're financially tiny, so we've got nothing to lose. And by implication, I guess they assume that ENET would stay silent if we actually had a multi-million-dollar budget to worry about. I mean, I can guarantee that we wouldn't, and I can guarantee we'll probably never have a multi-million-dollar budget either. But anyway, my presentation is entitled Fearless Conversations. So I just wanted to share what I think we need to see a bit more of if our sector is going to show less fear and more conviction and endurance in relation to messaging on education and other human rights in Gaza. So Palestinians have faced ethnic cleansing, occupation and human rights abuses since the Nakba of 1948. Many people simply don't know about that because historical narratives are dominated by the colonial powers rather than by the voices of the colonized. So to support learners and teachers in Gaza, we must seek out their voices. We must believe them, and we must provide a platform for them to be heard without censoring those messages, especially when they raise the historical context. We have a responsibility, and NGOs have got the skills to match up the authentic voices of oppressed people with what we know about international law. Rather than staying silent or only conveying weak messages because we fear reprisals, we actually need to come out and name the fear. We should tell our supporters what risks we're taking by speaking out for Gaza and encourage them and give them the opportunity to join us in opposing any restrictions and saying no to that fear. We've seen a kind of growth in joint statements on Gaza by organizations, a kind of strength in numbers approach to communicating. But these still tend to be rather standalone statements. They're not the sort of constant drumming that's needed. But there are organizations that can and will constantly speak out loudly against apartheid, genocide, and colonialism. And if your organization can't directly speak out enough, for whatever reason, you need to work with those that can. So lend practical and financial support to those organizations that specialize in persistent, hard-hitting messages. I wanted to finish really by acknowledging that there are many organizations that are writing and sharing excellent, powerful messages on Gaza generally and about the education situation specifically. So for anyone already speaking out and writing, keep it up, do more, and ENET will willingly help to share your content with a global audience. For anyone who's still sitting on that communication fence, please jump off now, right? Because while you're stressing about trying to choose the appropriate words, school children are being murdered and schools are being destroyed. And what we don't say now will come back and haunt us as much as what we do say. So please create those conversations and please be fearless about it. That's my message today. So thank you, Ayman. Thank you, INEE. And yeah, thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ingrid, for sharing these really fearless words on defending the right to education in Gaza. And lastly, we will hear from the director of the Margaret Anstey Center for Global Studies at the University of Cambridge and a historian of Palestinian education, Dr. Mizna Qawton. Over to you, Dr. Mizna. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Ayman. Thank you, Rifat. Thank you, Faiza. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to keep it short and sweet because I know there are so many questions and there's been such wonderful exchanges and conversations in the chat. So I want us to have as much time as possible with each other in conversation here today. But as a historian of Palestinian education, I hope you'll indulge me for a moment with a note on what this moment means and what it can mean for the international community and its thinking around what it must do or what it can do for Palestinian young people and Palestinian education. I'd like to remind all of us that, in fact, one of the first global fundraising appeals for Palestinian refugees in 1950 was not about food, it wasn't about resettlement, it wasn't about medicine, it wasn't about health, it was about education. It was an appeal to support Palestinian young people go back to school. Why? Why was that first appeal? Well, because by the mid-20th century, education was understood as the single most significant form of social mobility. In the aftermath of the world wars, education came to hold singular importance in the work and in the support for stateless people. It was the primary vehicle through which young and not so young refugees were able to transform their lives, transform their minds, transform their bodies, transform their worlds. It is the central crucible as well of identity formation for nearly every citizen and non-citizen in the world in the last 100 years. So what does that, and the same is true for the Palestinians. And it is through that prism that we must understand the question of education and how to support it in this moment. Because since their expulsion and dispossession, since the Nakba, the Palestinian response to the denial of education has been a historic drive for a self-determined education, an education built by Palestinians in their tents, and from their tents, crafting progressive and liberatory pedagogies for their young people and for young people across the region and around the world. And so when we think about education in this moment, I'd like to invite us to reflect for a minute before we rush into our planning, before we rush into our campaigns, about what it means to focus on education, to return to the purpose that drives all of our work. That the defense of education for the Palestinians, as for any other people, is not merely a defense of learning per se, but it is because education is the primary vehicle for self-determination. By us defending education, we are defending the Palestinian right to a peoplehood. We are rejecting the project of genocide. We are rejecting a project that seeks to eliminate a people. And in doing that, we also help Palestinians. We listen to Palestinians and we draw leadership from Palestinians as they struggle to rebuild their educational system and craft a new foundation again and again, as they have done for the last nearly century, in crafting new lives and new futures for themselves. And perhaps by building those futures for themselves, they're also building a future for us. There is no future for education anywhere in the world without the Palestinian being educated alongside all of us too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mizna, for these powerful remarks and ending us with a really important messages in there. We have 1 minute for the end of the webinar. We have literally reached the end of this webinar. And I really want to thank each one of you, our panelists, speakers, attendees who have joined us from all around the world for this webinar. Unfortunately, we may not have the time to address all the quality questions, really good questions that came in the Q&A chat box, but we will share them with the panelists and we will attempt to answer as many as we can, and we will share them back by an email campaign that we will send to all of you, including the recording and the presentation for this webinar. Thank you very much again for panelists, for the invaluable insight, for the call for action, for the the solidarity messages that you have shared with us, the action, the call for action, the contribution in this webinar. Thank you, Baha, Fross, Faiza, Mazna, Ingrid, Julia, Saleh, everyone for invaluable contribution. Thank you to INE, to the Global Campaign for Education, for the tech support throughout this webinar. And really hope this webinar on the right to education in Gaza has left you with really a few powerful messages and a clear action that we can take out to our organizations, to our community, and we continue to work together to uphold the right to education for all. Everywhere in Gaza, Afghanistan, Haiti, DRC, Yemen, Sudan, everywhere, because it's our right and our duty to uphold this right to education. Until next webinar, I really thank you for joining, and I wish you a great day ahead or good night to those who are at the end of the world. Thanks very much.
Thank you.